pretty good. We had a nice, the weather was always beautiful, the weather was nice. We'd go swimming in Santa Monica, we'd go to the USO in Hollywood, and they had all the starlets, you know, doing their duty for the war effort by dancing with us and all that. So everything was good, but even then I had an urge to travel. And one day they came, they said what they decided to do was to take one man from each office of these 4 offices, one man and at a time from each office, and send them to Army Finance School so they'd really get the training they should have had before. So they asked for volunteers. So naturally, nobody wanted to volunteer from sunny California. So I said, where is it? They said, Indianapolis. I've never been to Indianapolis. I'll volunteer for Indianapolis. What I found was, from sunny California, I went to the middle of the winter in Indianapolis. Another thing I found out, I get into this thing, and it's run by the infantry. The management of the post, Fort Benjamin Harrison, is an infantry post. It's the Army Finance School, but it's run by the infantry. And we're getting here what everybody had gone through in basic training and knew what the hell it was all about, and I had never done that. I get into the barracks, and I see guys with contraption around a button and polishing their button. I said, what the hell's going on? He said, didn't you ever have an inspection? I said, no. He says, well, so they broke me into all this. And then we had to climb walls, these wooden walls, you know, with ropes, and you climb over the wall. And they had live machine gun fight, and you got to crawl underneath. I said, what the hell is going on? We had forced marches in the snow, and it was rough, you know. And the finance was nothing. I knew all the finance. I could have passed their final exam the day I got there, because I knew all about finance from having learned it in the, you know, I dug in, I read all the regulations, and from casual working every day at different things, I came across all these things. So what happens on one day, I went out and I had this forced march, and I came back and I had pneumonia. They put me in a hospital. And while I'm in a hospital, I find out from people, the other guys who came to visit me in the finance school, that if you miss a certain number of days, you're automatically carried to the next class. And if you mess up in the next class and you don't complete it, they keep you there in the infantry. Here I'm in the Air Force in sunny California, and I'm being threatened with being in the infantry in Fort Benjamin Harrison. So I saw I had to get out of there. I was still sick. So I called over one doctor. He had a Jewish-sounding name. And I told him, I said, look, if I stay here, they're going to put me into the next class. So I get into the next class, I get sick again, and something else happens, I'm in the infantry. I said, I came here from the Air Force, the finance department, and I gotta get back. You gotta check me out of this hospital. So I get back. He says, son, he says, you're sick. He says, if you get out of here, you're first gonna die. So I said, well, I have to take a chance. He says, okay, I'll sign you out. He signed me out. I get back to the barracks. I look at a bulletin board. There's a forced march in 3 days, also on the snow. Well, I go over to this Sergeant Owensby. He was a full sergeant in the Army, regular Army, before the war. And as such, he could have gotten a commission, second lieutenant, first lieutenant. But he was a real Army man. He didn't want to be in the office. He wanted to be a full sergeant. And he wanted to be where he was. That's what he wanted to do. And when we got there, you know, he laid down the voice and said, look, I'm telling you what you have to do. You do what you want. If you get caught, that's it. He says, I have to give you the most of any kind of punishment you're supposed to get. If you don't get caught, it's okay with me, but my job is to tell you what it is. In fact, one day, I'm coming down a ladder, you know, you're supposed to be in bed check. So to be in bed check, I'm coming down this ladder on the outside, and he's standing there smoking a cigarette. And he sees me coming down the ladder, but he turns his back. He doesn't want to see me. And he's talking like to the air, it's a nice day, and the moon is out and everything, he says. And I'm going to play cards over at the NCO club, and anybody I see there I don't see, but if they get caught, it's their ass, not mine. So I go over to the NCO club, and I'm playing cards with him at the table. Didn't see me. That's the kind of a guy he was. So I come back, and I said, I got a problem. Oh, another thing, he was a Mason. learn the mason's ring. I told him I was a mason. My father had made me a mason. So I appealed to him on that ground right away, you know, that in case I ever had trouble, he'd know I was a mason, even though he said he's going to give the works to anybody who gets caught in anything, at least I have an in. So anyhow, I come back and I say, Sergeant Owensby, I got to talk to you. What do you got to talk to me about? I said, I got a problem. He said, what's that got to do with me? I said, well, you listen and you see what you can do. I said, I've just come out of the hospital and I still got the flu. And I know that if I stayed in the hospital, I'd go back to the next class. That's right. I said, so I came back, and now I see that they got a forced march again.
Yes.
If I go out on that forced march, as sick as I am, I'm going to get sicker. He said, what do you want from me? I said, I don't know. Maybe you can figure something out for me. He said, let me ask you, you know how to paint? I said, do I know how to paint? Of course I know how to paint. I never held a paintbrush in my life. So he's okay. He says, I'm putting you on a while we're going on a forced march, there's a detail that's painting the barracks. So you report to Sergeant so-and-so, and he'll put you on a detail for the painting. So I put on my fatigues. Everybody else goes out on this forced march. Did you ever hear this story?
I think so.
Yeah. So everybody else goes on a forced march, and I start painting, and the sergeant in charge of the detail, he says, did you ever paint before? I said, no. What the hell are you doing here? So I tell him the story. He said, all right, come with me. So he took me down, and he allowed me to paint the latrine. So that was my story.
So then you got back to Victorville.
Then I got back to Victorville. And then I volunteered again. They told me that there was an overseas cadre being formed, and anybody volunteered. Nobody volunteered. So I said, where is it? He says, they're in Kelly Field, Texas. I said, yeah, I never lived in Texas. Oh, I'll volunteer. So I go to Kelly Field, Texas, and that's how I got to be sent overseas.
You mean you wouldn't have been sent overseas if you didn't volunteer for that?
Well, they might have picked me, but the odds are that there were other people who could have been picked, and this way I volunteered myself. You know the story of Kelly Field with the dubbing on the shoes? I tell that story?
I don't know if I saw.
Well, we had a shack, and the shack was divided in half with a thin wall. One half was finance, and we were preparing to go overseas. We had to learn to work from field safes. They had field safes, and how to take care of them, and how to lock them, and how to guard them, and all the things that had to be done. And this story your mother knows. And the other side of the wall, they had the signal corps, and they were preparing to go overseas. Well, we had, one good thing about the finance department, we always had for 10 men or 20 men, we'd have a colonel or a major or somebody, and he would have pull because he was a higher ranking officer. Like one time I wanted to get the fresh uniform. I go into the quartermaster and they said, that's good enough. So I went back, I said, Colonel Scott, I want some uniforms. You want me to look neat? They don't give me any. He calls up the second lieutenant. He says, Lieutenant so-and-so, this is Colonel Scott. What kind of guff you giving my people? He says, you know, they don't have fresh uniforms. Your pay's liable to get held up. So that's the kind of influence he had. Anyhow, we had this captain who's going to be probably a major when we went overseas, and on our thing. And then the other side, they had a freshly appointed second lieutenant who never knew anything. And with the second lieutenant, they put a full sergeant who had been in the Army before and who knew what a signal corps had to do to get prepared to go overseas. And this guy would go out and get drunk every other week. And they'd break him from a full sergeant down to private. Then they'd make him a corporal and a sergeant and whatever. And the next month he'd be right back to full because he was the only one that knew anything. So, and this second lieutenant, you know, you can hear him getting wilder and wilder with this guy because there was nothing he could do and he needed him. So finally at this point he had broken him down to private, and this guy was on strike. He didn't know anything. He was a private. If you asked him something, he'd say he wouldn't know because he wasn't a full sergeant. He was a private. So finally in desperation, this guy, to punish him, and this was against the law, military law by the way, he gave him his personal shoes. See, an enlisted man got shoes issued. An officer bought his own shoes. He says, I want you to shine my shoes. This was supposed to break this guy down.